Welcome to a GDI Talent Acquisition Practice business development presentation. Hello everyone, my name is Alan Dunn and I'm president of GDI Consulting and Training Company. I'm here today to talk to you about how we assist our clients through our GDI Talent Acquisition Practice to recruit top talent. I'm here to talk about how we bring our experience, our deep industry knowledge, our substantial methodologies, and our discipline to the process of recruiting top talent. To learn more, please go to www.gdirecruiting.com. A good place to start is to start with an image of Jeff Colvin, senior editor-at-large of Fortune magazine, now an independent author. In 2009, we were doing research on why our clients hire so many misfits. We saw it over and over again. Our client looks for a new vice president of something. They hire that individual, they put out the press release, and a year to 2 years later, that person is no longer with the company, either voluntarily or involuntarily separated. And we're left wondering what went wrong. These big companies, big HR departments, lots of sophistication, and yet the track record on hiring is dismally poor. And so we started to look at this. We started to study capabilities and talents, and we started to study also recruiting methodologies and interviewing techniques. And we ran into this gentleman who wrote a wonderful book called Talent is Overrated, and he talked about the importance of deliberate practice and the importance of curiosity. He talked about the importance of emotional intelligence. And that led us to do our own study, led us to 300 other research pieces of work, and helped us to understand a little bit about the importance of hiring right the first time, the cost of hiring wrong, and also the importance of talent management. I love this quote because Jeff says that for virtually every company, the scarce resource today is human ability. That's why companies are under unprecedented pressure to make sure that every employee is as highly developed as possible, and no one knows what those limits of development are. Understanding where extraordinary performance comes from would be valuable at any time, but now it's absolutely crucial. You know, Jeff couldn't have said it better, but a great place to start is not in the developing of talent, but the hiring of the right talent to develop in the first place. Part of our studies and our research proved something to us that we found initially quite shocking. And that caused us to try to forget everything we ever learned about talent acquisition. We looked at 602 executives plus all their direct reports, and we looked at how they achieved success on the job. And we discovered that job success is not about experience, education, intelligence, memory, or inborn abilities. Oh, sure, those add up and help a little bit, but there was no correlation to those five concepts that I just talked about, or constructs I just talked about, and the way people really develop on the job. We also took a look at talent acquisition success and discovered it wasn't about sourcing of candidates. The internet's changed that. It's not about who you know, and it's not just about interviewing enough people and you'll find the right person. We kind of came to the conclusion that we need to constructively and thoroughly evaluate, by the way, methodically too, evaluate candidates' technical and behavioral attributes, because those technical and behavioral attributes are the most important elements in the recruiting process. And we'll see more about that as we go through this presentation. Now, normally when I do my Stop Hiring Misfits presentation, this comes somewhere in the middle of the presentation. I bring this right up front because I think the results of this research are just absolutely shocking and surprising. So out of talking to 602 manufacturing and distribution organizations in 2009 and 10, we discovered these cumulative values. We discovered that there are about 18 elements, characteristics, some competencies, some personal qualities of the average candidate that we're looking at for any manufacturing industry or distribution industry job. And we discovered that there's some competencies and some capabilities that they need to have. We discovered that 53 to 74% of the time when a person fails at their job, they fail because they're deficient in job competency. In other words, they don't understand the technical aspects of the job. 53 to 74%. If you understand that, then you understand that interviews have to be structured and have to prioritize to look at job competency and to evaluate job competency first. Because if the individual, the candidate, can't get through an interview on job competency issues, then all other interviewing is just a waste of time. Because 53 to 74% of executives and middle managers who lost their jobs lost them because of lack of job competency. Now, I might also comment that we had a lot of pushback when we presented these results, and we actually didn't believe them at first either, because what we heard were comments like, well, Frank, we let him go because he didn't communicate well with people, or Diane left us because she was frustrated that she couldn't get things done in the company, and a host of other reasons. It turns out when an individual lacks job competency, they invent, whether consciously or subconsciously, they invent masking skills. They invent skills to mask their lack of competency. Now, the word competency here is not a value judgment. It's a clinical term. So when you hear me talk about a person who is incompetent, that's not a value judgment on the person. That is just a shorthand way of saying they are not competent in what they were hired for. The reality is that most people that fail in their jobs because of job or lack of job competency should have been vetted in the interviewing process and should have never been hired in the first place. In other words, we're hiring people who can't possibly succeed because of their lack of job competency. The second reason was lack of critical thinking skills. 61 to 91% lost their jobs because of the cumulative impact of lack of competency and lack of critical thinking skills. So these values on the right side are all cumulative. Critical thinking skills describes a methodology of the way people think. One researcher said to us that, Alan, that everybody thinks, but everybody doesn't think methodically. And so a lot of people lose their jobs. They get hired because we didn't test, we didn't qualify, we didn't verify their critical thinking skills through asking them problem-solving narrative types of questions. The number 3 reason people lose their jobs or don't work out is because they're deficient in communication skills. 84 to 96%, cumulatively speaking, now are losing their jobs because of deficiencies in job competency, critical thinking, and communication skills. 84 to 96%. All 3 of these are incredibly easy to evaluate in an interviewing process as long as one uses structured interviewing techniques. The 4th is more of a personal characteristic, and that's deficient in personal initiative. The 5th is deficient in curiosity. 6th is deficient in imagination. 7th is deficient in creativity. And notice that when you get to these 7, this is the reason behind 96 to 99% of job failures. 96 to 99% of job failures can be identified, the reasons can be identified as one or more of these 7 issues. That's just astounding. That's just amazing when one thinks about it, because if we're looking at the whole person, there's probably 18 major competencies and personal characteristics that we look at, and a lot of other issues about the individual or the person that we look at as well. But at the end of the day, if we start our interviewing by focusing on questions and interview techniques in the sequence that are laid out in front of you, we can actually bring some level of efficiency to an interviewing process, which by nature is very inefficient and will never be fully efficient. When we interview for people for our clients, we spend a lot of time interviewing on job competency, and we do that up front. We do that in the early parts of the interviewing process because it does weed out an awful lot of individuals. Graham O'Connell, head of organization learning for the UK School of National Government, effectively their school for public servant development, he said no longer, in his book, no longer can we really just focus on instincts in HR or in recruiting or hiring managers. We have to really try to understand the whole person, and we have to understand the competencies. He said one view is that the right competencies get you from hopeless to adequate, but then we have to understand the qualities, and he further said the right qualities get you from adequate to excellent. So there has to be a sequence and a process by which we interview. Our research instructs us about why so many people who are misfits actually do get hired. On the right side of your page, there's the 6 reasons why corporate talent acquisition often fails, and on the right are the 6 reasons why interviewers themselves make poor hiring recommendations. Let's deal with the left side of your screen. The 6 reasons why corporate talent acquisition often fails is because there is a fundamental failure, this is number 1, to define talent acquisition as a core competency that demands investments in time, effort, and money. What we found is that interviewing is done so checklisty, so short, so abbreviated, that no one wants to spend the time in the process. The facts are very clear to us. To recruit a good, talented person means you have to interview a lot of people. You have to spend a lot of time. You cannot hire an individual without spending probably 20 to 25 hours, we've discovered, interviewing. That's a lot of hours to interview that person. But you probably also spent almost that much time with 5, 10, or 20 other people as well to get one. And so in this world of higher education, everybody out there that's interviewing has a brand, has a personal brand. And they're out there to promote that brand, and we have to get past the Madison Avenue hype to really understand that individual, to understand their disposition, to understand their capabilities, to understand their experiences, to understand their potential. And we can't do that in 30 minutes. We can't do that without investing in good interviewers, good recruiting practices, good processes. The second largest reason that corporate talent acquisition fails is a failure to define the job correctly. We pull out a job description from 7 years ago, we hand it to a recruiter or hand it to an internal recruiting person and say, go with this. And it in no way, shape, or form represents the jobs that we're hired for, and almost never describes the first-year goals, almost never describes the minimum eligibilities to keep the job, and almost never describes clear identification of success or success factors for that person to be successful, to earn a bonus, if you will. Failure to thoroughly define the job is one of the largest reasons why most acquisitions that fail. The third is failure to effectively identify the candidate's competencies and their personal qualities, to both identify and compare them from one to another. Identify the judgment competency of one and find a way to evaluate and compare it to another candidate. The fourth is checkbox recruiting, failure to plan, to organize, and to execute interviews appropriately, inappropriate focus on recruiting efficiency over recruiting quality. In recruiting, if you're going down a path of learning something about a person and you've allocated 2 hours to do that and you need to run late, my friends, you need to run late. We have to schedule appropriately so we can run late. We need to get rid of this check boxes. I check this off, check that off, and I'm through with the process. We need to not delegate interviewing activities to poorly trained and inexperienced personnel. And I see this all the time in corporate HR functions and even outside of the HR function and the rest of the organization, where they assign someone who hasn't been trained in how to interview. You know, if I was going to maintain a piece of machinery in your factory, you would want me trained. If I was going to run a piece of machinery, you would want me trained. If I was going to manage a department, you'd want me trained. why wouldn't you want to train me in interviewing techniques and processes? We don't spend a lot of time in organizations doing that, and we pay the price. And believe it or not, number 6, this unwillingness, inability, or incapable of objectively checking references and fully profiling the candidate. Oh my goodness, I cannot tell you how many companies don't do reference checks or only do reference checks of the references the person that they're interviewing gave them. They don't do background checks. They don't do credential checks. We, in our recruiting practice, interview people every week that we discover have embellished their resume, embellished their credentials, embellished their degrees. And yet their prior employer of 10 years never knew it. And we discover it. This happens all the time. That goes to integrity. It also goes to judgment. On the right side of your screen, we have the 6 reasons why interviewers themselves make poor hiring recommendations. The first one is what we call loss aversion. They have a great candidate. They're afraid of losing that candidate. And so they recommend that candidate even before they're done interviewing the 5 comparative candidates. Incorrect commitment to an inappropriate view of the job and or the candidate almost always is a result of not thoroughly defining the job. The third reason is what we refer to as value attribution. That's about imbuing the candidate with qualities based on perceived value rather than factual data. This is about falling in love with the candidate. This is about liking the candidate and not thinking about will this candidate be successful. Fourth is diagnostic bias, which is really built off the interviewer's blindness to evidence that suggests that the candidate is a poor choice. It's the blindness to red flags. It's the inability to identify those red flags, follow one's instincts on those, and move past that candidate. Then we have authenticity dilemma, which is really the inability to distinguish a candidate's real self from their brand, from their invented persona. We need to find a way to move beyond the interviewing phase and get to the real person. And that leads us to number 6, which is disposition confusion. Failure to really identify the candidate's natural disposition. Is this a happy person? Is this a sad person? Is this a to the nose, to the grindstone person? What kind of person is this in front of us? Those are our 6 reasons why interviewers make these mistakes. Research has shown us a lot and taught us a lot about why companies continue to hire misfits. It's taught us that job competencies are really the largest determinant of success. Believe it or not, they are the largest determinant of success of technical staff, managerial staff, and yes, leadership staff. Research has shown us that a leader is not going to be trusted by individuals, is not going to have the credibility unless they're technically competent. We also have learned that experience itself is a poor determinant for most of today's jobs. Most of today's jobs, one of the biggest requirements are critical thinking skills. We've helped clients, we've put people who grew up in leadership roles in the home building profession and put them into baking companies as executives, and they've done just fine. We have discovered that chemical engineers make great plant managers in food processing companies like bakeries or breweries or other types of food processors. And so experience alone that really becomes a poor determinant for most of today's jobs. Third is that candidates who deliberately practice that which they're not good at turn out to be more than 3 times more likely to succeed in their job. So we look for candidates who know their weaknesses. We look for candidates who know their weaknesses and have an actual plan for how to improve their weaknesses and are willing to share that with us because they have a 3x opportunity to perform better than their colleagues who don't deliberately practice. We discover that job performance and success is mostly the result of disproportionate capabilities in those 7 characteristics that I shared with you before. That if a person has job competency, critical thinking skills, good communication skills, good personal initiative, they're curious, they're imaginative, and they're creative. Those 7 characteristics are almost 99% of the success factors in most of today's manufacturing and distribution industry jobs, from the boardroom to the storeroom. We also discovered that structured interviews are 6 times more likely to properly profile a successful candidate than unstructured interviews. And what that means, a structured interview is a very simple concept. It's that if I decide to ask one candidate 38 questions, I ask all the other candidates the same 38 questions. So I have comparatives. So I have evaluation techniques. It's not about pure science. I'm not talking about hiring people with some statistical analysis formula. I'm talking about interviewing people and putting them on a common playing field when we're interviewing them so we can do comparatives, so we get away from phrases like, gee, I'm a fan of candidate A, or gee, I think candidate B did a really good job, or 3, I think candidate C will fit in really well. I mean, that's not what recruiting is supposed to be about. Recruiting is supposed to have a little bit more methodology than that to it. Superior talent acquisition requires substantially more time than more than 90% of internal recruiters spend, and substantially more time than more than 80% of external recruiters spend. It's in yellow, folks, because it's important. Proper recruiting takes a boatload of time to do. We need to spend the time. What's shocking to me is not the 90% of internal recruiters, or the internal recruiters don't spend the time. It's that the external recruiters that you're paying good money to don't spend the time. That is absolutely shocking to me. Especially when you get to the last item, which is that we've discovered that technology can help us. It can hinder us if we don't do it the right way, but it can also help us in improving the performance in our recruiting process. This is why we created the GDI Talent Acquisition Practice a few years back. We did this because we believe finding top talent, or helping our clients to find top talent in their manufacturing and distribution companies, is a critical way of them improving their company's performance. Leadership, management, and technical staff requirements continually evolve, but the need for high-performing talent remains constant. Recruiting top talent into any manufacturing and distribution company requires a rigorous methodology, not instinct, a rigorous methodology. This methodology begins with a thorough understanding of the position and continues through a detailed vetting and structured and comparative evaluation process that determines each candidate's real abilities and their real potential to succeed, not the abilities and the potential that they're trying to sell you. Using proven assessment evaluation processes, our talent acquisition practice specializes in matching the best candidates with each position that we're engaged to fill. We have over 35 years of manufacturing and distribution industry relationships. We have this with high-performing manufacturing and distribution industry talent. We have it globally, and this gives us unparalleled capabilities to fill almost any management and technical position within these industries. Our clients value our deep recruiting and our deep industry experience, our valuable business insights, our rigorous candidate evaluation methodologies, and our commitment to the success of not just the client, but also the candidates that we find for our clients. To learn more about the detailed methodology, you can go to www.gdirecruiting.com. I'm going to spend some time here walking through the process in a little bit. So we're going to get a lot of it here, but you can go to that website. We're a completely different type of talent acquisition company. We grew up in the consulting business. We grew up as business doctors. And we added the talent acquisition practice onto our normal practice because we wanted to find additional ways to help our clients, particularly in this area of recruiting where they continued to struggle and continued to hire so many misfits. We're disciplined, We're methodology driven. We work very hard to identify talent and to help our clients acquire it. We have proprietary processes backed by substantial research, not just our research, but by other researchers. In fact, we have accessed over 300 different research entities, plus our own research, to really build the best possible practice. If you go onto the website, you can find a bibliography of all of those research sources. We use proven talent methods. On top of that, we have great tools and we have wonderful instruments, particularly some of our testing and evaluation instruments. We focus only on the manufacturing and distribution industries. We use the right mix of high-tech and high-touch. We have huge domain knowledge of manufacturing and distribution, and we're fast, but without compromising quality. You know, all talent acquisition firms search at the right end of the bell curve. That right end of the bell curve is about 16.5% of the candidates. These are the ones you're looking for in your company. But we go a little bit further. We don't want our clients to be in the 16th percentile. We want them to be in the 2% percentile. We look at the far right side of the bell curve for those high performers. You'll hear this term from us all the time, far right side of the bell curve. That's what we're looking for, people who are excellent performers. What makes us different is our deep and thorough research in candidate competencies and personal qualities. Nobody evaluates candidates as deep as we do, and with methodology the way we do. We have 35 years of deep and broad manufacturing and distribution industries knowledge. We have robust talent acquisition methodologies, including our superior talent competency model, which is where it all starts, and many of our own evaluation instruments. We have extensive contacts in the industry because we've been around for 35 years. I've been in the business for a lot of years. I'm reasonably well known. And so a lot of people who are looking for jobs seek me and seek our company out. Number 6 is important. When we built this practice, we wanted it to be a dignified practice. We are known for the dignified way that we treat all candidates both during and after the talent acquisition activities. There is no black hole of resume receipt. Every resume, every piece of paper, every introduction we get is responded to, and every time we interview somebody, if they don't make it through the interview process, we tell them exactly why. We tell them the good news, we tell them the bad news, and we give them some insights on how to turn the bad news into good news. Dignity is about not taking away people's hope, and indeed, it's about enhancing their hope. A failed interview, from our perspective, a failed candidate interview is an opportunity for us to share with that candidate what we think they could do better to both position them to get a job and to perform on a job. We see it as a dignified service to them. We're also different in the way we deliver to our clients our superior talent evaluation report. When we're done with the search, we provide the clients with about 3 or 4 candidates, alternative candidates, all of who we believe can do the job. The evaluation on each of them is thorough. We go through all 18 characteristics of that individual. We go through our reference checks. Each dossier on each candidate is thorough from a technical perspective, an organizational perspective, and a behavioral perspective. If you want to know more, please call me, and I will show you a sample of a report that we create. We actually have a good sample that we can share with you to show you the kind of report that you're going to get. That way, when we provide somebody to you, you can be assured that they're technically qualified, they have the critical thinking skills, they have the communication skills, the right level of personal initiative, curiosity, imagination, and creativity, and all the rest, the other 11 or 12 characteristics. So you're going to discover they have all that. So by the time you interview them, it's really about, is this person going to fit into our organization and into our team? And we, because of our methodology and our approach, almost every search we do can be completed in under 90 days, sometimes less than that. So the 18 competencies and personal qualities that we look at are on the screen in front of you. The yellow represents competencies, the blue represents personal qualities. Job competency, critical thinking, communication, decision-making, and judgment, these are all the competencies. Personal initiative, curiosity, imagination, creativity, ambition, enthusiasm, team spirit, collegiality, integrity, courage, tenacity, discipline, and self-confidence round out the 18 capabilities that we're looking at. Now, we also take these and order them differently and look for other features. So if you take some of these and combine them, you'll get some leadership indicators out of them. But these are the raw elements of a person that we look at. We are biased. We're biased, I think, in a good sort of way. And we're biased because the research biases us. We value candidates who have disproportionately higher levels of job competency, critical thinking, communication, self-initiative, self-learning, and domain curiosity, imagination, and creativity. Those are all in those top 7 issues. We are biased towards people who have those kinds of capabilities. By taking those capabilities along with the rest of them, we build this job, or what we call talent comparator. So we can take and create from our job description, our what we call superior talent competency model that we build, we can build a profile of how a person should evaluate in our interviewing process. That would be the blue line on this sheet, this page. The orange line is effectively the way that we score an individual as we go through this process, this many, many hour lengthy process of evaluating them. And I'll share with you the methodology on that in just a minute. From this, we can see where the weaknesses are. That's where, in this case, the orange line is inside the blue line. And we can see where the unique capabilities are that the person might have that we need to figure out how to use them. And that's where the orange line is outside of the blue line. I've identified in yellow the competencies and personal qualities on the right because those represent the top 7. Those represent the ones that give us the most interesting perspective and the quickest perspective of a candidate. So here's our 6-step talent acquisition process. The first 3 steps are specify, source, and evaluate. Specify is really about collaborating with our client to create an in-depth job competency model that precisely describes the core job competencies and personal qualities that the candidate needs to possess in order to be successful. So we start with a straw model for almost every management, technical, and leadership position in manufacturing and distribution companies. We have a straw model, superior talent competency model. We have it already built. We provide that to the client. There's 23 elements of description in that model. Everything from job duties, responsibilities, authorities, accountabilities, to first-year goals, success factors, minimum eligibilities to keep the job, etc. We even have a feature in there referred to as behavioral catalysis. Behavioral catalysis is how does this person in this job become a catalyst for something? Every person, we believe, in every job in a manufacturing distribution company can be a catalyst for some other action, for good accounting or a catalyst for good quality or a catalyst. And so we want to evaluate candidates to see where their catalysis is, where they're interested, where they're passionate, because where they're passionate, if we can use that, can turn into real value to our client companies. So we start over on the specify by taking the client job description, doing some industry research, building some outside perspectives of the job, and then taking our superior talent competency model to the client and working with the client to modify it to meet their needs. And the output is that we end up with an agreed upon specification, if you will. That specification drives everything. That specification, the superior talent competency model, is the beginning of the process, and it is the most important of all steps. Once we're done with that, then we get into the sourcing phase of the step of the process. We identify and we engage with the best prospective candidates based on the collaborative developed job specification that we just finished. So we're going to use our contacts, client-provided contacts, social media, job boards, just old-fashioned recruiting intelligence gathering. And then we have a screening methodology. We do not use the parsing tools that parse resumes. We have discovered and, in fact, have invented techniques to bypass those. Those parsing systems fundamentally do not work. They leave a lot of good candidates behind. And there are so many ways, 3 in particular, that almost any candidate can trick this. We've done tests on this where we have found ways to trick parsing systems that can virtually guarantee that a candidate gets an interview. And so for those reasons, we don't use them. We do, however, once we screen and get down to the candidates that we think we might want to employ or could potentially employ, then we put them through what we call a phase 1 interview. A phase 1 interview, the longer term, is the GDI lifestyle compatibility interview. So we have a standard process. You'll see kind of an example of it a little bit later, where we do it as a video conference with the person no matter where they're at. So we get a little bit of efficiency by doing that. We can see them, they can see us, and we can hear them, talk to them, and while we may not have traveled to meet in the same room, we can get the next best thing to it. So that video conferencing technology with the platform that we've developed works to connect us with these potential individuals. From that, we down select, notify all those who were down selected out, why we decided not to move forward with them. We do it in a compassionate, we do it in a hopeful sort of way, and we talk to every single one of them. There's no blue hole, or excuse me, no black hole at GDI Talent Acquisition Practice. Once we're done with sourcing, now we get into evaluate. So that phase 1 interview is really about screening in a sense. Now we're going to get into evaluation, utilizing research-based sequential interviewing instruments and reference mining processes. We're going to evaluate and down select candidates until we get the best, most competent candidates possible. So phase 2 interview is the job competency interview. This job competency, let's imagine it's for a chief financial officer that we're searching for. It's probably about 105 to 125 questions long. Those questions are specifically created to identify competencies, to identify critical thinking skills, to test some communication skills, and to mine for references as well. We never stop mining for references. Once a person makes it past that gate, think of it as a phase gate sort of a process. Once the person makes it past that, then we have them take the Clifton Strength Finders assessment instrument, which is an online assessment instrument, was developed by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tom Rath out of Gallup. He's a behavioral researcher. This is a highly correlated instrument that really identifies an individual's level of engagement. We know that those are highly engaged, moderately engaged, and disengaged in companies, and obviously we're looking for those highly engaged or engageable people. And so we do that. At the same time, we set up a process to do a communication skills assessment. By the way, that job competency interview in phase 2 also provided us with huge amount of information on critical thinking skills, as do virtually all of the interviews feed into the critical thinking skills analytic. Phase 4 is where we have an organizational behavioral assessment interview, and this is really behavioral 101. It really tries to understand what drives the person, what behavioral aspects they have that are positive, which ones are negative, and it's probably about 60 to 100 questions that we go through again by video conference, and that video conference is really designed to get them to open up. By this time, we're probably in the 10th hour working with this candidate over video conferencing capabilities. Should they get past that, if there's additional optional behavioral testing, like we've used Watson-Glasser 2 test to test for critical thinking when we were unsure based on our evaluations. But assuming there's no optional behavioral testing, then we go meet them, we fly to where they're at or they fly to where we're at, and we spend a half a day with them in a social interview. So the social interview is about manners, it's about how they socialize, it's about openness of discussion, it's about judgment and reaction. It's about demonstration of emotional intelligence. There's a lot that comes out of the social interview. And then once they get past that, if they get past that, then we start doing all kinds of other analytics, and we set up structured client interviews at that point in time. In parallel to this, we're doing background checks on them at the same time. So that gets us to step 4, profiling. Profiling is going beyond interviewing and evaluating. We're really doing some background checks, some credential checks, some reference checks, and we're doing a lot of evaluation of them. And from that, we create this incredibly thorough GDI Superior Talent Evaluation Report. This report goes through everything we've learned about the individual, and it talks about it. It's very graphic, so there's lots of bar charts that explain the individual candidates' critical thinking skills relative to the competency model, and then every candidate relative to the other candidates as well. So we do comparatives. And then after that, then the client makes a decision who they're going to hire, and that's where we help them to engage the candidate. So working with the client and the candidate, we assist in the formal engagement and hiring process. We don't have to do this very often, but where necessary, we have some talent engagement agreement or employment letter agreement templates that we can provide to the client. The outcome of all of this is an employment offer and an acceptance from the candidate. But we don't stop there. This is another key difference. 6 is the onboarding, or helping to accelerate the onboarding process, utilizing some tools that we've developed. So we take our talent evaluation report that I talked about earlier, and we take our talent competency model, and we have an onboarding process, and we sit down with the candidate or newly hired employee, and we walk them through what they need to focus on the next 90 days or the first 90 days of their job. In fact, we even give them a book called The First 90 Days, written by Michael D. Watkins, and it really talks about what you need to do those first 90 days, because in his research, he discovered the first 90 days pretty much paints everybody's opinion of you. And so it's really important those first 90 days to behave properly. The outcome of all this are some coaching sessions and some placement and development. I want you to think about, when we do an evaluation of a person, we identify all their strengths and all their weaknesses. We provide that to the client. Our final report, that Superior Talent Evaluation Report, is also a tool to aid in development of the person. So when you take a look at it and you put it all together, our experience, our industry knowledge, our methodology, and our discipline manifests in all the tools and all the processes and all the steps that are listed on this page. It all starts in defining the job requirements using the GDI Superior Talent Competency Model, and it all ends with an engagement agreement and then some onboarding after that. And everything in between, there are models, there are tools, there are instruments to make that happen. From the candidate perspective, it looks like there are 7 gates the candidate has to go through. They have to successfully get through the GDI Lifestyle Compatibility Interview, the Clifton Strength Finders Assessment and GDI Competency Interview, the GDI Communication Skills Assessment, the GDI Organization Behavioral Assessment, and any optional behavioral testing, the GDI Social Interview, the background credential and reference checking, and then the client structured interviews. So there's 7 gates they have to get through. It's a lot. It is a lot of work, which is why we do it instead of HR departments doing it, because we can do it better and faster in any organization. Now, people ask me, why do we use the Clifton Strength Finder assessment instrument right after we do the competency? Well, we do the competency because that rules a lot of people out. When we do the competency assessment, that rules out 75% of the people usually. And so then we look at, we then do our behavioral assessments, but we support that with a third-party assessment instrument, which we pay for out of our fees. So we're paying for it because we believe this is in the best interest of the clients. The Clifton Strength Finder assessment provides validation to our interviewing process. It also provides additional insight. That insight comes because it basically looks at people from 4 what they call themes. So we have the relating theme, which is really about how candidates work with people. The impacting thing, which is about how candidates influence people. The striving things, which is what candidates think about working harder. And the thinking themes, which are themes around why or how candidates work smarter. So in these 4 themes, 4 categories of themes, there's actually 34 individual themes. So the relating themes tend to be harmony, communication, empathy, includer, individualization, relator, and responsibility. So you can read the words while I'm talking here, but most of these are the elements of emotional intelligence. We have intellectual intelligence, IQ. Intellectual intelligence is about how smart a person is. Emotional intelligence is how smart a person is within the context that they exist. In other words, it's about that socializing. It's about those social skills. It's about empathy. It's about how they include others and how they communicate with others and how they relate to others. It's about not just how they are the smartest person in the room from an intelligence perspective, but how they're the greatest influencer in the room on others' behaviors. And so these relating themes tend to be the themes that support emotional intelligence. If you want to know more about emotional intelligence, go to the www.gdirecruiting.com website, and you'll actually find a really good paper written by Steve Kirkpatrick on the website. Then there's, in the impacting themes, there's actually 6 sub-themes in there that people impact others through commanding, competition, developing, positivity, maximizer, or wooing people. I like the wooing people. Tom Rath at Gallup tells us that wooing people, this is about people strong in the woo theme, love the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over. They derive satisfaction from breaking the ice and making a connection with another person. You can't have a good salesperson that doesn't have a woo theme about them. We look for striving themes. So striving things are really about this person's ability to just outwork the next person. It's about their discipline, how they look at achievement, how they activate themselves and others, the belief in what they're doing is right, how they stay focused, how they restore themselves when they run out of gas and then have to re-energize themselves, and how much self-assurance they have. And then lastly, there's 12 thinking themes about working smarter. And so these are designed, and the reason we like the Clifton Strength Finders is because it helps us to really validate our characteristics that we're looking at. So we're looking at ideation. That's about being a visionary. That's about being curious and imaginative. We're looking at intellection, and we're looking at learner and context, because that's about how a person exists within the environment that's been given to them. One of the things we look for in our own methodology is the person's ability to be a self-learner or a fast learner. And so this helps to validate a lot of those. By organizing those, we can actually take a look at how a person, how strong they are in executing, influencing, relationship, or strategic thinking. So these are clearly leadership capabilities: executing, influencing, relationship, and strategic thinking. So we spend a fair amount of time taking the Strength Finder data and rearranging it, and you can see the different sub-themes that fit into each of these. So if a person is a strong activator with high communication skills and very competitive, that person is likely going to lead through influencing. So we really need to make sure the job requires somebody to lead through influencing. If it doesn't, that's not the right fit for the job. So it really provides us with some great insight into leadership capabilities. Those leadership capabilities are about executing and influencing and relationship building, strategic thinking. It's rare to find a leader with all four of these at any level in a company, but if you have one of them, then you need to be in that job. So if you're in a vice president of quality assurance job and you're trying to fix an organization that's broken, we may need a strong relationship builder and a strong strategic thinker. But we may not need somebody who's good at executing. We may need somebody else. So this is the reason why we look deep, deep, deep into the person. And that's why we use the Strength Finder work. Now, this is a tough document to read. I will blow this up so we can look at it a little bit deeper here. And we can then start to get a sense of the actual steps we go through. So I'm not going to bother going through the bar chart data. I'm just going to go through the steps. So we have an initial client meeting to sign a client up. That's followed by industry research to figure out what other companies are doing in this job. So imagine we're hiring a VP or searching for a VP of quality assurance. We're going to listen to what you want, but we're also going to look at what industry thinks companies like yours should need. We're then going to work with you to build the GDI Superior Talent Competency Model. That's a collaborative event. And then we're going to do some optional profiling of your other managers that this person is going to work for. Now, that's optional, and some clients don't want to do that. But, if we're going to put new candidates through a Strength Finder analysis, we may want to put your other people that this individual is going to work with, in other words, his or her peers. So we have time to do that. It's optional. Then we spend a bunch of time sourcing candidates. Every week after the second week, or actually starting in the second week, at the end of every week, we provide our client with a one-page status of how the search is going. It's a graphic status page, so it's easy to understand. And for every search, one goes out for every search every single Friday, come rain or shine. We then do a screening of the resumes and the basic information. We down select that, and then we contact the individuals that we're going to do our lifestyle compatibility interview with, and we're going to give them a preparation document to prepare them, basically to explain the process that they're going to go through, the gated process. So everybody who starts our process knows what they are going to go through. We've had some that don't want to go through it, and our position is we don't work for them, we work for our clients. We will do everything we can to make sure that our clients get the right person the first time. And so we realize it's a bit of a burden on people who we're recruiting, but all we do is find ways to get through it faster. We don't skip steps. So we prepare them, then we do the lifestyle compatibility interview. And while we're doing that, through every interview, we're reference mining. So whenever a candidate answers to a comparative question with a story and refers to something that they have done, we make special note, because later we're going to go back and say, can you give us the name and or address of the person who was familiar with the activity that you talked about back in the lifestyle compatibility or the job competency or the behavioral interviews. So in other words, we never stop mining for reference data. In other words, the more the person or the candidate talks, the more reference data we get. So we don't rely later on only the positive references that they give us, and that they make sure the person who's doing the referencing knows exactly what they're going to say. In other words, we get rid of the stacked deck on references. So then we down select after this compatibility interview, and then we take the list of people that were your candidates that are going to go into the competency interview, and we share that list of people with the very briefest of background with our client and with key people or key constituents at our client company to see if any of them know this individual. It's a pretty small world, and instead of spending a lot of time interviewing somebody that's not going to be hired because somebody had a really bad experience that we can validate, we're not going to waste the client's time on that. So we share the preliminary list of candidates and a little bit about their background even before we start the job competency interview, noted in about the middle of the page. After the competency interview, we then down select again, and then at that point in time, these candidates are going to take a strength finder assessment, and then we're going to also they're going to fill out a document that's really called the ideal position profile. So there's a form they fill out for us that really describes the ideal position for what they think their personality and package of capabilities brings to the table. Later on, we're going to complete it by filling out what we think the package of capabilities that we've discovered in the interview, what the perfect job is, the perfect position is. So we're going to have them tell us their ideal position. Later on, we're going to then see if our ideal position matches theirs. At this point in time, by the way, we're already doing background checks because they've passed the competency. We literally 80+% of the people who submitted resumes are already gone, and we're not talking about a lot of people. So we execute basic background credential and so university credential checks on these candidates at this point in time. We do it because we want to get a jump start on this. We don't want to do it sequentially when we can do it in parallel. At that point in time, the candidates then put through a communication skills assessment so we can assess both their written and verbal skills. About 15% of the candidates at this point in time will fail. There'll be great people who can't really communicate with other people, unless the job is a job that doesn't require communication, which we haven't found that job yet. But if that existed, then this would be an unimportant task. But right now, it's very important. So we down select after that, and then we get to the organizational and behavioral assessments. And so that's another 2 to 3 hour interview that we do with a video conference interview. And there's external testing if necessary. That would be optional. And then we down select. And then after that, we have the social interviews, continue on the reference checking, where we've done in the prior checking, up in the prior black line, we did background checking and credential checking. Now we're actually doing reference checking. And then we do a final down select of the candidate. We complete the Superior Talent Evaluation Report, which will ultimately go to our client. We complete our portion of the ideal position profile. We do a video conference with our client to go over the 3 or 4 top candidates. We basically go over the executive session of the Superior Talent Report. And then we leave the entire report with the client. We send them a PDF of the entire report. So a typical report, the executive session will be under 30 pages long, lots of graphs, lots of pictures. The full document will be 100 to 150 pages long. We'll leave that whole document with them for about 3 days, 3 or 4 days, give them time to study it, and then we'll have a meeting either in person or via video conference with the client for them to go through it and decide who they want to interview. Normally they interview everybody because it's never more than 4 individuals that we put forth. All 4 would be qualified. It could be less than that, but it's never more than 4. We then, after that, we prepare the client and we prepare the candidates for interviews at the client sites. This is where the client and the candidates meet for the first time. We are not present. We worked with the client and with the candidate to build their strategies to interview the other, but they're free to do whatever they want. So we specifically and on purpose do not attend those meetings in order to make it an intimate meeting between client personnel, and candidate. And then after that, after they're all done, so we try to get them all compressed within a few days' time. So usually these interviews with the client usually last about a half a day. So for candidates is 2 days, maybe 3 at the most. After that's over, we debrief with our client and they select a final candidate. And then they negotiate and sign the agreement, do whatever drug and alcohol testing they need to do, And then we do a pre-start coaching session with that candidate. After the candidate's been selected, sign their employment agreement, then we work with them and take all the data we have on them, all of their strengths, all of their weaknesses, and either in person or via video conference, sit down with them and go through it in detail so they can understand what they might need to work on going forward. After that, we provide to the candidate and to the client, we provide optionally, this is not part of our recruiting fee, but we provide them a fast start onboarding process. We set up comprehensive coaching sessions, and we create a new employee development plan if the client wants to do that. So again, at this point in time, we're in a perfect position to really do a development of a new employee development plan if the client so wishes. So that's the process that we go through. The most of that, in fact, virtually all of that gets accomplished within 90 days. For some positions, it gets done even faster than that. Now, I will give you a warning that we're very, very well aware of. Some will say that GDI's process seems like an overkill. We've heard these exact phrases. Gee, Alan, there's a lot to this process. Or, gee, Steve, the process requires the candidates to invest just way too much time. Or, how can GDI accomplish everything in this talent acquisition process in less than 90 days? By the way, the answer is methodology with overlapping and parallel activities. We hear, why can't GDI just give us 3 great resumes and let us interview the way we want to interview? Well, that's not the business we're in. There is nothing GDI does that 2 or 3 instinctual interviews wouldn't do, and we wouldn't have this process if we thought that was true. In fact, we have tangible data that proves that that is not true, that we can't interview on instinct any longer, not with the highly educated workforce that understands the self-brand mentality better than ever before. And then from candidates, we've even heard people say, you don't really expect someone like me or with my background to go through all of this, do you? And the answer is, yeah, we actually do. Unless you're extremely well known in the industry, unless everybody knows your capabilities, we're going to put you through this process. We almost never fail to convince a person that this is valuable. And even those that didn't want to go through it at the end, even if they don't get selected, are really grateful when we go back to them and say, okay, let me tell you about you. And, there's a courtesy. I'm going to go through everything that we learned, and you can either agree or disagree. And if you agree, then you can actually build your own personal development plan. That speaks to dignity. The reason we go through this is because the cost of hiring a bad decision are incredible. Lose 12 months to discover and conclude that the new employee is a misfit. Add to that 3 to 6 months to find a suitable replacement, and 6 months added to that to get a first sense of the replacement employee's probability of success. So hiring the wrong employee leads to 21 to 24 months of lost time, lost productivity, and lost leadership. Seriously, how much are companies willing to gamble on antiquated recruiting techniques? So we have to spend the time, we have to use the technology, we have to employ methodology, and all of that then results in client interviews where there's no question about competency, critical thinking skills, curiosity, imagination, creativity, and those things. There's no question about that. It's all about, will this person fit with his or her colleagues? Everything started, as you remember, with the collaboratively developed superior talent competency model. That competency model that started all this has 23 discrete elements, from position and title to general theme to knowledge base to what they need to know, the responsibilities, accountabilities, eligibilities, limitations, information and data that they are responsible for that others use, corporate culture that they have to live within, minimum qualifications, desired qualifications, how we know the person is successful, all of these first-year goals, probable career path, all of these are important aspects of the job and all have to be known before we get started. Then when we get started, when we start the interviews, this is a typical platform for how we do the video conference or the video interviews. We make interviewing technology both personal and efficient. So this is an exact page out of an exact screen out of an interview. And so this is a sourcing and procurement management question. We have a whole series of categories of questions that we've predefined, pre-built, and pre-validated for virtually every job in a manufacturing and distribution company. This particular question is a narrative question. It's designed, if you look at the left of the box or to the right of the photographs there, or videos, you'll see an area called characteristics, and you'll see that job competency, critical thinking, and curiosity are highlighted with an orange box next to them. That means to us, interviewing, and the candidate on the other end, it means to them that this question really helps us to understand the person in the context of these three descriptors. So the question in this case is, imagine you are the purchasing parts cost analyst for John Deere tractor. I have asked you to visit 2 suppliers of tractor transmissions, one in China and one in Kansas City. I have requested that you do a comparative analysis of how each of these suppliers' costs are derived. What are the major elements of each supplier's costs that you will need to determine in order to construct a reasonable comparative analysis? And so when we ask that question, we know that this is really getting towards a person's curiosity, to their critical thinking skills, and to their job competency. The desktop, because we used GoToMeeting to do this, GoToMeeting is actually embedded into this tool as the linkage connector because everybody's system can use GoToMeeting or Citrix. So their desktop is to the right, so they can control their video, they can control their audio, they can control everything, and it's simple, simple, simple. Early interviews use this proprietary video-based system, and it really helps to bring the candidates face to face. So you see Amanda, the interviewer, you see John at the top, the interviewee, and they can see each other, and so this has a lot of value. One, we can tell the person's not Googling answers by doing video, because when we did audio only, we could hear that sound in the background, which was fingers hitting keys while they were Googling answers. And so this stops that. It also helps to personalize the process and to enhance the dignity of the process. In the lifestyle compatibility interview, there are 15 categories of questions that we select from. Questions that are built for each interviewee. Those are what we call red flag questions. Things that didn't make sense on their their resume. We ask those the first time we're on the phone or on a video conference. We go through past jobs, lifestyle, compensation requirements, intentions and desires, relevant experience, preliminary job screen, personal initiative screen, curiosity, imagination. And so we're doing some basic interviewing here to see if these people can meet our clients' needs. So this is more of a screening interview. We have our 450 pre-designed and vetted questions that we choose from depending upon the job that we're interviewing for. In the job competency interview, because we only focus on manufacturing and distribution companies, we've broken it down into 30 categories of questions, from enterprise questions, manufacturing plant management questions, strategy, functional interfaces, all the way down to facility design. And we have over 1,700 pre-designed and vetted questions to choose from when we do these interviews. And so for this particular job, what we're saying is that we've chosen, where there's an orange box, we've chosen questions from plant management, production management, material flow, warehousing, distribution, information technology, quality management strategy, and functional interfaces. And so we only took questions from those categories, and probably not every question from our catalog of questions. We also have, for the organizational behavioral assessment instrument, we also look at conflict, people, work life, inspiration, and motivation. And those combined with the strength finders really give us a sense of the person's emotional intelligence. We also look at the remaining competencies and qualities in our evaluation technique. So we look at decision-making, judgment, ambition, enthusiasm, team spirit, all the way down to confidence. Again, over 475 vetted questions. So we go through this to evaluate, and eventually the client makes an offer. And our work doesn't end at placement. We have this fast start onboarding capability where we build an onboarding book. By looking at the whole individual, we can evaluate the ongoing learning needs and provide suggestions. We can provide coaching to the placed employee as well as to management. We can identify employment problems before they pass the point of no solutions. We can also follow up at periodic intervals to do additional coaching and performance assessment. So the illustration you're looking at suggests an observation that we strongly believe in. So the job is represented by the box. It's got boundaries to it. The individual doesn't look like a square box. The individual looks different. And so where we see the individual is not having the capabilities in the box, that's a weakness. And when we see that individual having capabilities outside the box, that looks like a uniqueness and also might look like an opportunity. So for example, in one of our clients several years ago, I hired a marketing manager. The company has a lot of customers, a lot of suppliers in far off places, places where you actually really do need a corporate airplane to get to. And so sure enough, the top candidate also was a seriously qualified multi-engine jet pilot. And so we actually realized that he could travel to customers using the corporate plane all by himself if necessary. So when we had those times where what you spent to get to a customer didn't matter, he was able to beat the competition every time. And that was because that was a uniqueness that came to him. So why should a company use GDI's talent acquisition practice to help in recruiting top talent the first time? Well, it really starts by understanding that we're serious about this business of talent acquisition. None of us grew up in the headhunting. None of us grew up in the recruiting business. We grew up in the business doctoring, the business consulting profession, and realized very quickly that most of the recruiting firms were just swapping resumes and not really doing the detailed vetting. You know, with the advent of the internet, sourcing of candidates is easier than ever before. The challenge to recruiting is not sourcing. Anybody in an HR department could do the same sourcing that we do very easily. Some of it might be a little bit more difficult, but still doable. So we don't look just for candidates who have resumes online. We're looking for people who have resumes online who might know candidates inside a company who don't have a resume online. So we can do that and make those connections and find those people. And that's because the internet has given us the first key to the first door to get to the people that we're really looking for. But what the internet hasn't done for us is given us an ability to evaluate this new breed of personal brands that are out there. So the real challenge to recruiting now is really in the evaluation, not in the sourcing. So our vision is to be the world's leader in talent acquisition for the manufacturing and distribution industry, which means we have to be the leader in evaluation technology, techniques, and processes. Our mission is to be a trusted and essential talent acquisition partner for our clients and candidates to the point when they don't want to do a search, they call us to ask the type of people that they should be hiring, where we can have open dialogue, honest dialogue, where we trust one another. I am absolutely confident that the way to build a talent acquisition practice is to demonstrate competency in those jobs and in the industry that you're serving. And that's part of our mission. When we started this practice, we built a belief system, which we not only believe in, but we believe it needs to be communicated to our clients. We believe people are the most valuable asset in any enterprise. We believe the value of the individual is paramount. The right individual in any organization can make a substantial difference at any level. We believe in manufacturing as a societal value creator. Manufacturing is at the core of any affluent society. That's why we choose to serve the manufacturing and distribution industries. Banks call us, we don't do searches for banks. Financial service companies, we don't do them. Railroads, we don't do them. We do it for manufacturing and distribution companies. We believe our talent acquisition practice must always bring value to both candidate and hiring company. A job placement must be right for both parties. We believe that most companies have not invested appropriately in talent recruiting methods and generally don't possess the internal capabilities to execute talent acquisition excellently. Yes, there are some companies. There's maybe 1 or 2% of all companies in existence today, in our opinion, spend the appropriate amount of time in talent acquisition and talent retention. And by the way, those are top companies like GE and Danaher, and we're just proud as can be of those kinds of companies because they really do understand at the end of the day, it's all about people. We believe that talent acquisition should be approached with methodology and not just instinct. Instinct on top of methodology is fine. Instinct without methodology and facts is not fine. Interviews should be structured and fact-based. Comparative candidate information should be developed from the interviews so you could actually analyze the candidates against each other. We believe effective talent acquisition requires close client-recruiter collaboration in the development of a job and company-specific competency model. We've talked about that. And we believe job competency is a disproportionate determinant of job success, and that all job success begins with a high level of job competency. And so we believe that early evaluation of a candidate has to be around competency, technical competency. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time because if 75% are going to wash out over lack of that, and that's been our experience, then that means that if we let those go to the last interview, we're wasting a lot of people's time. So getting through the technical competency evaluation soon is a way of building efficiency into a naturally inefficient process. We believe that a talent acquisition process must be executed with the highest level of mutual respect and dignity, and we believe that every serious candidate is a potential future client or candidate in another company. In other words, we treat candidates well because we know they're going to find a job with us or without us, and we want them to remember us. And so it's not just about business development, it's also about dignity. If you treat everybody in your life like they're a customer, then dignity is going to be the natural outcome. We believe we have an obligation to provide every Phase 3 and beyond rejected candidate with an honest appraisal, an improvement path, and some level of value-added coaching. And we do that. We believe the way we execute talent acquisition is not for every company. It may only be appealing to companies that value true talent acquisition over traditional headhunting. And so we don't do headhunting. We do have values, though, on top of our beliefs. We value evidence-based talent acquisition. We value deep, well-constructed competency models uniquely configured for each recruiting opportunity. We value framework-centered methodology in recruiting. That's important because it's not a highly prescriptive methodology. It's a frame-based methodology that allows for deviation periodically where necessary. We value structured and well-prepared interviews that concentrate on evidence of skills, capabilities, and accomplishments, not just pontification from candidates. We value independent candidate references that only proactive and diligent reference mining can deliver. And we value the analysis of the whole person and the identification of the uniquenesses in any candidate. Number 7 and 8 are really important. We value dignity and respect, especially with job seekers. We value honest, critical, and frank feedback to candidates, no matter how happy or how painful it may make them feel. It has to be, the dignity has to come with transparency of perspectives. So this is about the time where everybody asks me, gosh, Alan, that's a lot. How much is this all going to cost? So here's what it costs. It's 35% of first-year expected total compensation. That includes salary, bonuses, starting bonuses, incentives. It doesn't include benefits. It just includes compensation. We charge the client $7,500 when the contract is signed. This compensates us for the collaborative development of the Superior Talent Competency Model. That $7,500, by the way, is credited later to the 35% fee, so it's part of the 35% fee. Since we are a retained search firm, reimbursable expenses for travel and additional testing if it's necessary will be reimbursed to us. We do work on an exclusive project basis. We understand our client may have some candidates pre-identified. That's all right. All candidates will be routed to us for screening and our evaluation using our methodology, along with the candidates that we source. Client agrees during the project period to not engage with any other recruiting firm, retained or contingency firm. Doesn't make any difference. Client agrees that if any candidate we present is hired within 1 year, even if they don't hire them on this go around, if they hire them as a result of this later on, they still owe us the 35% compensation. And then onboarding, consulting, and post-employment coaching will be priced separately. So for companies that want to utilize our research methods and tools and build their own internal talent capabilities, we actually license our methodologies and instruments as well. So just call us at the website noted at the bottom of the page there, and we're more than willing to talk about that. In fact, we're tickled if a company will do this on their own and dedicate the resources. We'll provide those resources. We'll sell them or rent them, but we really, really, really are happy if companies follow this because the results are just outstanding when companies do this. And then, of course, there is a guarantee. Any placement that we put in a company that's terminated by our client within 1 year of the new employee start date will result in GDI Retained Talent Acquisition Practice redoing the search for zero fees. We won't charge any fees. The only cost will be any reimbursable expenses that we spend doing the search. But otherwise, the fee will be free at that point in time. So my final thought to all of you is that hiring top performers is serious business for serious people. Failing to allocate the required time, capital, resources, and methodologies to this most important of all leadership responsibilities is really a failure of the highest order. When mediocre talent is recruited and or retained, enterprise mediocrity is certainly not far behind. That pretty much wraps up this presentation. Just a comment that the interest in our clients doesn't end with talent acquisition. For those of you who know us, you know that the consulting and training company, GDI Consulting and Training, is primarily a consulting firm that does all kinds of consulting from the boardroom to the storeroom. The Manufacturing Executive Institute is an organization that provides training, both live training in a wonderful training center that we own in Corona, California, and also e-learning based or web-based training that's produced through Radio MEI, our e-learning production studio. We also have a practice that does evaluation of suppliers. That's our GDI Supplier Assessment Practice, where clients hire us to go out and do due diligence on their critical suppliers anywhere in the world, anytime. And then, of course, the Talent Acquisition Practice. So we can bring numerous professional services to our manufacturing and distribution clients. All of them eventually, at the end of the day, focus on making people more successful. With that, I would like to thank you for listening to this lengthy presentation on how we conduct our talent acquisition practice and how we find the best candidates the first time. For more information, please go to www.gdirecruiting.com or feel free to call us at the phone number noted on the page. Thank you for listening, and best of luck in your talent acquisition and talent retention programs. Bye-bye now.